It's time for a little comedy, a little content, and a lot of conversation. It's the Geno Jones Show, exclusively right here on YouTube. And now here's your host, Geno Jones.
Hey, it's showtime. It is the Geno Jones Showtime. So I'm coming to you live Monday through Friday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. if you're in Chicago, 3:30 p.m. out in Los Angeles, or up in Seattle or Portland, Oregon. And if you're chilling in Hawaii, unless you're on the island with that volcano. Man, did you see that volcano with the lava? Whew. Okay, anyway, I digress. 1:30 out there in Hawaii. Please subscribe to the Geno Jones Show YouTube channel. Subscribe, share, like, and binge watch all my back episodes. So let's jump right into it. First of all, listen, I'm excited because I have two guests. I have a young man, a young woman that are just really doing some, like, literally life-saving work out in these streets. You hear about people being like violence interrupters and just community advocates that are literally out here on them streets. You hear people and kids say, we out here in them streets. Well, this sister, this brother, they are literally out here on these streets trying to save lives. And they're going to share the real, because, you know, we hear the politicians and the CEOs and, you know, folks on Twitter pontificating and, well, you know, and the crime, you know, and then, of course, you hear the whole MAGA crowd and the cult talking about, well, the crime in the inner cities. That means the black folks. That's the translation. You know, all the black folks are criminal in the whole 9 yards, even though you got white folks that commit crime at the same level of black folks. And that's a whole different show. You can go back and binge watch all the back episodes. But if you really want to know what's really going on, and if you really want to get an idea about what we really need to do, listen to some folks who are really out here emotionally invested, not just talking to, but they have relationships and just, you know, every day, you know, with brothers and sisters, just trying to just save lives and just come up with solutions, some solutions. So I'm excited to talk to both of these people, and I'm really excited for you to hear from them. First of all, Herschel Walker, you don't have to go home, my brother, but you got to get the hell out of Georgia. See ya out of here. Take your embarrassing country no talking. You just insulted black folks. And for the whole MAGA cult that put this dude up, it's like, oh, just put any black person up there. He doesn't have to be intelligent. He ain't got to be able to put one sentence, let alone two sentences together. He can talk about wanting to be a werewolf, whatever. Just put a black face up there and black folks will vote for him. Psych, wrong answer. Do not insult us. Black people are very sophisticated, and voters were very sophisticated. So really, you insulted black people by just putting anybody up there in this thing. Oh, black folks, if he black, well, they'll vote for him. Come on, dude. Don't play me that way. Don't insult us that way. And the brothers and sisters in Georgia, they showed you what we are not going to do. No, this dude ain't representing not just black folks, just people in general. Come on now. You wouldn't do that. You would not. Well, actually, they have done it with some white candidates, so I take that back. But I digress. So Herschel Walker, like I said, you ain't got, Morris, they say, you ain't got to go home, but you got to get the hell up out of Georgia. Yeah, you do. Congratulations to United States Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock. So do you know, this is important, so listen to this. Reverend Warnock, Senator Warnock, has won 4 elections in 2 years. He ran 2 years ago for the U.S. Senate. He won. But Georgia's got a law like some of these states. Really, they created these laws like 50, 60 years ago, some even longer, because basically they saw, especially during the civil rights era, they were afraid they being the whole, just those who wanted to oppress black folks. I'm just keeping it 1,000. You know, the racist, white nationalist crowd, that whole MAGA cult, you want to be neo-Nazis, let's take black folks back to slavery. Just keep it, I got to give it to you straight, no chaser. So they really created laws. So basically say, well, wait a minute, hold on. If if they got the most votes, we got to come up with a way to, well, we can like redo, like your boy Orange Hitler wanted, like just throw out what happened. Well, it must be cheating, so let's run it back. Let's redo the election, because there's no way that all those Negroes could have voted and not voted for me. So these states, and you can Google, actually, you can Google it, okay? You can Google scholar this. These were laws, basically voter suppression laws, to make it harder for black candidates to win. So they came up with these. If you don't get 50%, 50.1, there's a runoff. Because the assumption was, well, if we do that, if they have to run a second time, then like all those black folks, they'll get discouraged and they won't turn out. Actually, the exact opposite happened in Georgia. So just shout out to the state of Georgia, the brothers and sisters, not just melanated brothers and sisters, but the non-melanated brothers and sisters that voted for a man who was competent, compassionate, intelligent, a true man of God, who had the best interests of everybody, not just in the state of Georgia, but everybody nationwide. And a man who was the pastor of the church that Dr. Martin Luther King used to preach at, Ebenezer Baptist Church. So congratulations to Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock. Hey, if you are a big fan of SWV and Xscape like I am, sisters were killing the game with the R&B in the 90s. So they got a new reality show that's coming on Bravo. It's called Xscape SWV. So the show is going to focus on the ladies, the personal and the professional lives. So that's going to be exciting. I got to get these sisters on the show to talk about this reality show. They don't have an exact date when it's going to come on. It's going to be on Bravo, the Bravo cable network, sometime in 2023. All right, listen, I want to bring my guest on because I really want to give them as much time as possible. Tisa Wack is the co-founder of an organization called We Are Their Voices. And Brother Keith Smalls is the founder of my Communities Keeper Mentor Group. He also works with a hospital here, the Medical University of South Carolina. He does what they call, you hear people on TV call it violence interrupter, but I'm going to let them tell you exactly what they do. They are on camera right now. Once again, I want to welcome Tisa Wack and Keith Smalls. Welcome. Thank you both. So let me explain to everybody real quick. Let me give my viewers like a real quick background here. There was an event that dealt with, law enforcement and how to, prevent violence and reduce violence. And you had police chiefs. You had the police chief of the city of Charleston. You had some other people in law enforcement. You had and people from the community. And this sister and this brother, they were speakers, and they really blew me away. Both stories, they turned their own personal pain into purpose. I'll let them share their story because they can tell their story better than I can. And I was really impressed, and I was committed to using my platform to help amplify what these people are doing, because you hear a lot of people talking, man, we out here in the streets, and they're out here really, literally in these streets saving lives. So Tisa, Keith, thank you both. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
So, so Keith, I'm sure you won't mind. My mother's watching, so she always reminds me that don't forget your manners. Ladies first, and hold the door for the ladies. So let's let Tisa. So why don't you just briefly share your story and tell us everything that led you to being a co-founder of We Are Their Voices and what exactly your organization does.
Okay, thank you, Geno. I appreciate you having me on. So my organization is called We Are Their Voices, and it was birthed out of tragedy, to be frank. My son, my only child, Tyrell, he was murdered on November 30th, 2015, which is just about a week ago. I made 7 years. That night, it was very traumatic for us. We just celebrated Thanksgiving in Georgia with my father. My mom had died earlier that year, January, and we were, still going through the grief of that and very devastated. and we decided to go visit my father in Georgia for the holidays. We all had went. My son was married, had only been married a few months before this happened. Had a son. He has a son who turned 4 days after he was murdered. So we just coming back from Georgia. We arrived that Monday morning. He somehow misplaced his keys and didn't end up going to work that day. So he ended up, him and his wife went to my sister's house. One of his friends asked him to give him a ride to a neighborhood. They went and met a fella there. And we don't really know what transpired, but the end result was that he was shot and killed in the Greenhorse subdivision in Somerville, South Carolina area, along with his friend. My son was 23 years old, and his friend that was with him was 21 years old. All I can remember from that night, for the most part, is the coroner showing up to our house after, frantically looking for him, not hearing from him, because he was just supposed to run around the corner and come back. And I remember that night when my son died, we were informed that he was murdered, going in my closet, my walk-in closet, because it was the quietest place I could think of to get away from. Now families arrived. It's in the middle of the night, and I laid down in that closet and I cried, you know, essentially cried myself to sleep, not really sleeping. But years later, after the devastation of my son dying, I couldn't really fathom what to do next. I really was numb for years. I mean, we're going on year 7. I'm really just starting to feel more like myself, trying to get more interactive with friends and family more. But the devastation from that night put me in a place where it was kind of like, do you stay in this closet and do you cry and suffer every day? Or do you come out and you make give some purpose to what happened to him? Doing this, like I said, my son, I left a 2-year-old turning 3-year-old at that time. And we literally was trying to plan a funeral plan a birthday party in the midst of a funeral. Because at that age, he's 2, he doesn't know. He spent every day with his father. He didn't know what was going on. So just living through that pain, living through a daughter-in-law who just had been married just a few months, and not knowing how to navigate this world. She didn't sign up to be a single parent. She became instant single parent. Losing your only child, it's devastating. I often look back and wonder how families even deal with when they have other children, because how do you soak that love in when you're still broken yourself? And so, fast forwarding to how my organization got started, another young lady by the name of Chandra Bryant, her son was killed in the very same neighborhood as my son the year before, about a block away. And it was around this time of year, and my son was just buried. And she reached out to me via Facebook Messenger, and she said that, God really laid it on her heart to reach out to me because she knew how it was, because she lost her only son in that same neighborhood. And her son had a daughter that was born a week after he died. So our lives were really parallel. And we kind of used each other to navigate and to through this new normal that we had. And we were at a community meeting in Lincolnville, and it was talking about gun violence and what the effects of it, what we can do. And she turned over to me and she said, we have to be the voices of our sons, those victims of gun violence. And that's where We Are Their Voices. And what we primarily do is to be the voice of our children who were killed. But then also we offer support to survivors of gun violence, because it's a club that no one ever wants to join. It's nothing that I ever would say, hey, Geno, come join us. Never. But we know that there's a uniqueness to what happened to us, and there's a space that we can share amongst each other in order to communicate about it. But one thing we noticed in the community and through what they called survivor support and victim advocates, we never really saw anybody look like us. We went through therapy, we went to counselors, but we never really felt like the support group was for ourselves. No one really understood the uniqueness of what happened to us. So we started a support group of our own. And we actually have a licensed counselor that comes in and speaks to families and victims of gun violence, or survivors, not victims, because we survive it. And we've been able to do just so much to support, because after the news stories, because every night there's news stories about this gun violence,
Yeah.
this shooting, this death, and it drowns and saturates the news. But at the end of the day, who's there to support those families? Because long they walked away, we're still in our grief, we're still devastated. We've just learned how to navigate on a daily basis. 7 years my son has been dead. 7 years, and there's not one day out of those 7 years I have not thought about my son. Every single day. And to hear my grandson ask me, is the bad man who killed my son, he's killed my dad, is he in jail? And we have to explain to him what's going on. I don't sugarcoat it for him. I don't pretend like it didn't happen. I explain it to him because he doesn't need the fairy tale, because life is not a fairy tale.
Yeah.
So that's just a quick synopsis of me. So I'll let Keith tell a little bit of his story.
Yeah, brother Keith, you have a story to tell also that was very compelling and it really hit me. So I'll let you share it.
Yeah, um, my Communities Keeper is the organization that I founded. I'm the executive director. Um, it is a 501(c) nonprofit, what we consider grassroots organization, which means, kind of came from the ground up, right? And this organization was an organization that I kind of had a brainchild for while serving time. I served in excess of 19 years in the South Carolina Department of Correction. And I would, kind of clarify that that was two different times. The first time I spent like 2 years, 7 months, came home maybe 2 years, and was sentenced to 29 years for drug trafficking. And of that, I served 16, almost 17 years. Um, when I went to prison, I uh, had a 1 year old son and three daughters. Um, and, you know, during that long time uh, in prison, one of the key factors in my rehabilitation and the evolution of myself, Keith Smalls, wasn't so much so the institution, but it was the individuals in the institution, the elders, the old school vets.
Yeah.
I had some great chaplains who were mentors to me, and I've called them coaches, life coaches, or mentors. So that was planted in me when I was incarcerated, the idea of mentorship. Um, and I even started a mentor program in a prison that I was at through the chaplain in the church based on the T.D. Jakes book, So You Call Yourself a Man. And it was pretty dope experience. And I thought that it really did me, but also the individuals who we were mentoring so much good. I was released from the South Carolina Department of Correction October 1st, 2015. And at that time, my son was 16 years old. My firstborn, my only boy. It was, my idea, my vision, my version of life was that me and him would be working side by side, dad mentor, son junior mentor, wherever the organization would be, we would be working side by side. Um, Coming home from the Department of Correction after serving that long of a time, you know, definitely gigantic, barriers, trials, tribulations. I was fortunate to have a village of my mother and sister and brothers, but I was also fortunate to be able to get custody of my son at the age of 16. But he had been through a lot in all those years that I had been going, and all that I had acquired to be able to help him, it was time consumption. It was, time wasn't on our side. A year after my release from the Department of Correction, I'd say exactly a year and 26 days, he was murdered by a 15-year-old in a neighborhood not too far from my mother where she lived. Um, and that began, the first of the step moving forward. For me, coming from the Department of Correction, my concern was the 15-year-old, and it was a 17-year-old who was an accomplice. Not that they get a million years, right? For me, it wasn't so much that I forgave them, and I'm honest about that, but it was about them getting help. And I knew that the Department of Correction wasn't designed to help them; they would have to help themselves.
Mm.
So at that moment in that courtroom, I acknowledged that to not only the judge but to them. My concern is for you guys' well-being, that you get help. Well, the 15-year-old was given a short sentence. He came home 2 years and 7 months later and has since shot three other people.
Ah, damn it.
So it was clear he needed help. And what I looked at was what helped me in my time, mentorship. So maybe 2 years after losing my son, the idea came to me from a friend of mine who said maybe you should start your own nonprofit, and kind of get behind the work that you're doing in the community, because I almost simultaneously began doing the work after my son was murdered, talking in schools, marching in North Charleston, South Carolina, going to community centers and neighborhood meetings, from my neighborhood where I was born and raised, Accoby, to Shakora, Cherokee, to Dorchester, Wheeling, where my son was murdered, and just hanging in those areas, getting to know the people and letting them know that, I'm there to support whatever effort they have, but I also have a vision for that community. And that vision became my Communities Keeper Mentor Group, which is the organization that, again, I founded, and I'm the executive director of, where we have signature programs called Boys Will Be Boys and a Girls World that we're doing not only in the community, but we also do in schools like Stall High School, Greg Mathis Charter High School, Meeting Street Burns, where we have a book club. And again, I can kind of go on and on about my Communities Keeper Mentor Group and the work that we're doing, whether from schools to community, but also where I work at MUSC and the Hospital Violence Intervention Program, Turning the Tide, where we work with individuals who are victims of gun violence from the first day that they step through the door, helping them with wraparound services, and healing and recovery from that gunshot wound. And our greatest work is done during discharge, when we go home with that individual who has been a victim of gun violence and help him figure out, more so the direction, the decisions. How can we, get you on the right path, keep you in the right path, keep you healthy, happy, and at peace,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that, is the combination of my work from the hospital side to my Communities Keeper Mentor Group side, kind of working in it almost like a perfect balance, but not necessarily perfect. I think it's almost impossible for it to be perfect with the high rate of gun violence in the city, and the capacity of work that comes across not only my desk, but I would say the same thing for Tisa and her organization as well.
Well, first thing, so Tisa and Keith, listen, I really want to thank you guys. A part of me kind of feels guilty because I can't even imagine what it's like to even have to recount and share this story. I could imagine how triggering it's got to be. So part of me feels guilty that I'm part of that trigger, but I appreciate your level of unselfishness and purpose, wanting to share this story so you all can prevent the violence that fell upon your family, to try to make sure no other mother or father or family member has to experience this. So let me ask you guys this. I like to do something on my show. I like to give it to you straight, no chaser, to my viewers. I want to put it. My grandfather and a guy named Joe Madison is a radio host on satellite radio. Said, "Put it where the ghost can get it." My grandson, Jeannie, put it where the ghost can get it, which meant just put it right there where anybody, a second grader, could understand it. Right there, the roots, or as like our elders would say, the roots. If there were three things, if we could sit everybody from the mayors, police chiefs, to governors, lawmakers, the president, CEOs, and brothers and sisters who live in the community, and brothers and sisters, let me just hit this button, who maybe moved out of the community, what are like maybe at least three things, I mean, it doesn't have to be three, that you would say, listen, this is what the community needs? Because like I say, you guys are putting in that work. What would you say to that group of people? Tisa, you want to start off?
One thing I would say to the group is we have to invest in our youth. And that's time and resources, because you can't tell someone not to do something if they don't have any sustainable things in their community to build off of. I mean, you can't just tell them not to do that and not provide like libraries, transportation, even food and livable housing. You know, those all put people in positions where they feel like they have to do things that they, I mean, essentially know is wrong, but they go into it. I don't think, you know, and this may sound crazy to some because, you know, someone took my son's life, but in a sense, I almost feel sorry for him as well because not only did our lives change, my son and the young man who was killed with his family changed too.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, and as a mother, I know from a mother's perspective that you know we don't raise our children to harm other people. I mean, we want to instill values in there. But another thing that I would say, you know, Keith mentioned about mentorship. I think mentorship is very important, but I think the mentorship also should involve the whole family unit because if you mentor that child, you're mentoring them for that time and that space. But if those values aren't instilled into that family um, or reinforced through the family unit, then everything that Keith put into that child doing that mentorship, not to say it will go to waste, but he's going to have to work harder to get that child to attach to those things that he's teaching them. And just, you know, being kind to people. I mean, it sounds very simple, but we live in a world that we only think of each other, only think of ourselves instead of thinking of each other. You know, think about how you treat people because we don't know what may trigger someone because of the way we treat them. I mean, we know that gun violence exists because of you know violence amongst our youth, but then also you see a lot of mass shootings that you know predominantly air on the news, and we see more of that. But think about the triggers and what things that might be happening within the family that kids coming to school and teasing people for minute things like shoes and clothes and
Yeah.
I mean it's really ridiculous because as you get older as adults as far as what we buy we place less value on those things than
Yes.
some kids do. It's about having comfort and having sustainable clothing and shelter and whatnot. So those are like three things that you know I think everybody can participate in. You just never know. One of those three things can help save a young person or save a family from having to go through a tragedy
Keith, what
and
would you
have to
like to
live
add
through
to
it.
that?
I think this, everything I definitely, agree on every one of those things. But one thing in particular that Tisa said that I had at the tip of my tongue is the investment. I think, whether it's political support, um, law enforcement support, I think when we do community events, you will always see these individuals at the forefront of these events and they support us, but are they investing in us? Um, that is the key to sustainability. What Tisa and I have been able to do when others like ourselves have been able to use our passion to create some change, right? But if we put dollars behind the passion, then you see sustainability and you begin to see the needle move.
Yes.
Um, it is a very important, it's a very big thing. I think they always talk about when you hear politicians or community, I think elected officials, they always talk about we can't arrest ourselves out of this issue, or you can't expect the politicians to solve all the problems. It has to come from the community, and then you say, okay, well, as we've learned, me, myself, and Tisa, and others who work in the space, okay, so initially we would say, okay, you want the community to do it, well, support the community. And they say, okay, we'll support you. They will come out. But support and investment is two different things.
Yes.
You could tap me on my pocket and say, hey man, I support you, but I'd rather you put something in my pocket that invests in my work, that gives me, the things that I need, economically to do this. Working at the hospital, the big conversation that I brought to the table is the social economical issues. You have individuals who come to the hospital with a gunshot wound who are more concerned about how they're going to pay their bills when they go home. They're not caring
Yes.
about a gunshot wound. The social economical issues is real. And the last thing, like I was saying, I don't think I give one, two, and three, but I definitely know that investment over support is what I favor and ask for. But also, they have become a habit of not only pimping poverty, but the criminalization of poverty. Um, the poverty state of our city. Charleston is the highest rate of gun violence in the U.S. 92% of the firearm homicide increased from 2011 to 2020. Over 80% of all homicides are committed by firearm. And I'm reading statistics, and I don't really care to get into statistics, but I want to kind of share it with you. But here's the other statistic. Homicide is the leading cause of death for young Black men and women ages 15 to 34, and that has jumped over car accidents, which was the number one. Now it's the leading cause of death for young Black men and women ages 15 to 34 in the nation, exceeding car accidents. If we really want to get ahead of this issue, you will begin to see investment in it. Now, I will tell you this, there's beginning to happen. Now, are we going to now combine investment and support in the community, grassroots organizations, people with lived experience who've come out and say, hey, let me be a part of the change. Let me help the community. You know what I'm saying? Let me, give you my ideas, my passion, my purpose with a little training and investment. Those are key.
So, and let me just add to this, and if I'm misspeaking, I want you all to correct me. I got about a minute and a half, but I want to say this. When we say, here's my take, when you invest in the community, you have to invest financially. We have to go back, and I call it, why don't we remix the hood? A lot of us have made it out of the hood. We can reinvest. We don't have to wait for governments or developers to gentrify. We can go in and remix our own neighborhood, which is a different show. I talked about that the other day. But the investment has to be emotional. If I'm wrong, let me know. It's got to be financial, because when you are emotionally invested in something or somebody, then you will be invested financially, spiritually, and physically, in every way possible. I don't if I'm off base with that, you all let me know. But I believe the two got to work hand in hand. So when you are investing, it is a complete investment, financial, emotional, and everything else.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Geno. It has to be financially. You have to be invested emotionally, because one thing I always tell people, and Keith's heard me say this before, we do this work not because we have to, because our children are gone. Nothing that we're doing right now is going to bring our children back. So it'd be easy for us to just wipe our hands of this and say, the hell with it. But we don't, because we don't want other people to feel this way. So when we talk about investing emotionally, our community, invest like it could happen. Really realize that it could happen to your family member, your child, because there's people who last night, last week, 2 weeks ago, never thought this would happen to them. And now they're in a situation and they don't know how to navigate this. We will help people when they come, if they encounter the situation, but we want to be starting to help less people get out of this situation and help more people invest in their communities and in their future because we want our kids to grow up. We want them to grow up to be successful and to live long lives. We don't want to keep burying kids under 25, and 30 years old, and who've never had a chance to even live.
I got about 30 seconds. Please give everybody the information where they can go to your website or the social media platform where they can go support the organization, volunteer, donate money.
Well, for me, it's We Are Their Voices. wearetheirvoices.com. You can find us on there, and then on Facebook and social media is We Are Their Voices as well. And we're here to support them any way we can.
Keith?
My communities keep a mental group.org. On social media, it is My Communities Keep a Mentor Group, Facebook.
All right, I want to thank them. I knew it was about to lose a live shot. So My Communities Keeper Mentor Group. If you do a search for My Communities Keeper Mentor Group, Keith Smalls, Tisa Wack, thank you. I will be bringing them back on the show because there's so much that we didn't have time to cover, but they will be regulars on the Geno Jones Show. Thank you for letting me be a part of your life. As always, God bless each and every one of you, and especially you. And God, most of all, thank you for letting me do the Geno Jones Show. I come to you live Monday through Friday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. in Chicago, 3:30 p.m. in Los Angeles. Subscribe, share, like, and binge watch all my back episodes. Shout out to Mr. Markel Bailey, the official barber and hairstylist of the Geno Jones Show, the CEO of Designer Cuts in the Charleston, South Carolina metro, Goose Creek, South Carolina, a suburb of Charleston. Check him out on Instagram, Kel B Cutting Up, KelBeCuttinup, because Kel be cutting up, as you can see. Allie Jones, she is the drip director, the official wardrobe consultant and stylist of the Geno Jones Show. Check her out on Instagram, LX, L like Lexi, X like extra dot, NCL underscore, LX dot, N like Nanette, C like Charlie, L like Lexi, underscores at low dash. And Bruce Gage, also wardrobe consultant and stylist for the Geno Jones Show. Check him out on Instagram, Miglio D Mario Uomo. That's MIGILIODIMARIOUOMO. The next live edition of the Geno Jones Show is going to be Thursday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern. I love each and every one of you. Thank you for everybody watching me live. Shout out to everybody in my chat room group, Master Dre, Mary Dixon, my mother. I love you more than life itself. So if you missed some of the show, go back and binge watch this and every episode. Subscribe, share, like, and binge watch all my back episodes. So until I see you live Thursday, 6:30 p.m. Once again, thank everybody for watching. Thank you to Tisa Wack, co-founder of We Are Their Voices, and Keith Smalls, founder of My Community's Keeper Mentor Group. Check them out, social media, go to their platforms, go to their platforms and their websites. Support the organizations, volunteer, more important, donate money, invest money, and invest emotionally. Join these organizations, get out here in these groups, get out here in these streets, and help these brothers and sisters that are trying to make sure that no one else has to go through the pain that they had to go through from losing a child to gun violence. I love each and every one of you. I really do. So, till Thursday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern, live right here on the Geno Jones Show YouTube channel. As always, be blessed. Pray for peace. Thanks for watching.
Subscribe and tune in to the next episode of the Geno Jones Show, exclusively right here on YouTube.